Welcome to day 28, and this one we're going to be working with the Twilio API to use their actual Python client to do our API calls instead of what we've been doing, which was using Python requests to make the endpoint calls. This will all make sense once we go through it, but of course we're going to be picking up from where we left off in the last one. So if you go to our GitHub, which is github.com/codingforentrepreneurs, or joincfe.com/GitHub, it will take you here. Going to go to the repository in 30 Days of Python, scroll down to day 28, that folder, click on the file that says day 28, send SMS start, and we're going to go ahead and work off of this. So you can click raw and copy all this, go into Sublime Text 2 and paste that stuff in. So this one, I now want to change all of this to using, instead of requests, but using Twilio's REST client. So what we want to do is go into the documentation. So just twilio.com/docs. This is going to bring us to our general docs, and we can go to all the different quick start guides, or we could just kind of say what it is that we're trying to do, which is SMS and in Python, and it's going to take us to something like this. Now, this isn't giving us a whole lot of data. So what I want to do instead is go to the API reference and click on SMS, and then go to send SMS and MMS messages. And we've got Python here, right just like that. Now, we could go and see how to set it up through one of their guides somewhere, but instead I'm just going to go into my terminal, and we're going to be working still in that virtual environment that we were working with before. And if I do pip freeze, I should see that I just have Python requests installed. Well, now all I want to do is install Twilio. So it's pip install Twilio, and that's what we're going to be going off of. Now, I'm using version 5.6, but there's a good chance that this actual API service is not going to change a whole lot going forward. In fact, this actual video is going to be so short because it's really actually pretty easy to work with their API client, but it's also very important to understand what is actually going on in their API. Again, you could go to the documentation to read all this stuff, but we're going to go through it. I'm going to keep the username, account SID, and password stuff, as well as the message and all of these things. So everything leading up to the Python request thing, so the auth cred, I'm actually going to get rid of all of these. Well, we do want to keep that data dictionary though, just in case, because we do have another little thing in there that we want to use, which is that image. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of everything from message URL and down. In fact, these URLs I probably don't even need themselves, but we'll leave them in there for just a second as reference, just to show you how easy it is to do what we're about to do. Now, I want to go ahead from the very top. I'm going to do right below requests from Twilio.rest, import Twilio REST client. And this Twilio REST client takes place of our Python requests. In fact, to set up the client, that is to authenticate with the Twilio API service, it's really, really easy. All we do here is client equals to the Twilio REST client, and then the account SID, and then the auth token. So those are the things that I want to use. I'm actually going to rename the username to SID and the auth token to auth token. I don't want it to be too confusing in here with all the other stuff. So now I've got the client actually set up, and I have some of these other things ready too. The post data, actually all I really want is this string out of here, so I'm just going to cut this out and call this media_URL, and I'll put it equal to that string. Message body, another new one. Okay. XML pretty, don't necessarily need that for this client. I don't think I will, at least. I will cut it and just bring it down to the bottom. And now I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this other stuff. Now it's looking a little bit cleaner than what it did before. So how do we actually send a message? Well, let's add a little note here for it, just so we have it for later. This is going to be create/send. So it's kind of taking the post method, or at least taking place of the post method that we did in the REST framework. So just a little note there for that. Really, really simple. First of all, I'm just going to set a variable called message. This is also coming from the documentation. So if you went on their documentation and saw it, this is what it is. And it's just client.messages.create, and then all the different parameters that you want to have in here. So like who you're sending it to, that is the number to text. So number to text, and then who it's from. That is, of course, your Twilio number, and then our body, so the body message, and that's message body. So those are the things that are required. Now, there's a few optional ones that you can also add in. So if I copy and paste this, I can actually add in media URL like we saw before, and we'll just put in media URL. There's another one I can do is called status callback, and this will go to a URL of your choosing. So I'm gonna just like leave this as a note for those of you who work with Django. And if you don't work with Django yet, you definitely should at some point in the near future. But this status callback is a URL. So like, let's say for instance, www.yourwebsite.com/some way to handle. This status callback would essentially send a post message to this URL, and then on that URL, you could actually handle the data that comes through. That is, if a message is sent and then a status changes in any form or fashion, that status then goes to this handle. It actually goes to that URL and updates it accordingly. So that means also that you could send this message out from a variety of places and have it call back to your website, as in one place that would handle that stuff. Okay, so that's just a nice little note to think about. This is, of course, optional. And again, you'd have to actually have an endpoint or a URL to actually handle that callback message. Otherwise, you'll get some error message that comes through to you. So let's go ahead and try this out, this right here. And what I'm going to do is actually just print out the message.sid. And we want to see what looks like there. And I also want to see, maybe, because I'm sending an image, I'll also print out the message.media.list. I'll explain those two things in a second. So we're going to save this, and we're going to jump into our terminal. I'm going to clear everything out and do Python here. And we'll go back into Sublime Text. Let's copy all of the imports and all that. All the imports and the data. Looks like everything. No errors there. That's good. That means we didn't have any spelling errors on Twilio REST client as well as the other stuff. That's good. So let's go back in and we'll get our message here. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. Paste it in, and we got some errors here. So I think I know what the error is, and maybe you don't, but it's this. It's from. So from cannot be called this way. It cannot be a keyword argument because that is how you import things. So it has to be from underscore. That is actually in the documentation. Just a slight little mistake on the typing, but it is something, and it's a great opportunity to talk about that because now I can copy and I should be able to paste it in, no problems as far as that actually working. So that's good. And now I can also check out to see this stuff. So I print these things out, and what I've got is I've got the message ID, which is this, and then I have a list of media items. So in this case, I only have one, but if I sent multiple, this is where it'd come out. Right now, I just have this one media item list, so we can actually take a look at that item by doing 0. That brings us to that media item. And then we can actually get out the URI, or the Uniform Resource Indicator, which is also sometimes short for the URL. And I click on that, and that actually brings me this URL. It gives me the URL for that particular image, so I can copy that, and we could go into Chrome and paste it in, and that actually redirects me to the image that was being sent. Of course, I can check this to make sure that my messages are coming through, and they are. I can also check my email to make sure that that's coming through, and it is. Really, really cool, pretty straightforward, not as hard as the other one, right? That was a lot easier. In fact, with the other one, it's not straightforward on how to actually get the image that was sent. This makes it nice and easy for us. So what if I wanted to go one step further? That is, what if I did have that endpoint or that callback and I was able to get this SID number? How do I get the information from about this message? Well, it's fairly straightforward. We do message data equals to client.messages.get SID equals to whatever that SID is. And that SID, when we printed it out, it's this right here. So I can actually copy that and paste that in there. And this will now give me the same sort of message data that we saw right there. So if I print out the message data, I should be able to see the same data. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste it. And it does. It sends me this message data. I'm not seeing everything inside of the message data right here. So for me to see the available methods, I could do print dir of message data. So this prints out the module, all the things available in the module. So if I click on that, I can see that I can click on body. So I could do message data.body. And that shows me the body, right? I can do any of these. So I could try any of these at least. Message data.status. Sent. That's good. That's what we would want to see. We could also see message data to, and so on. We could go through this whole thing. And this is really nice because if we did set up an endpoint or a callback, I would be able to parse the data this way. So the data would come through to this URL with this ID, and then I could do all sorts of things with it, like, oh, hey, in my server, I see that it was sent, so I say that it was sent. You know, stuff like that. But I could also list out all the images that are in that list again. So we did this right here. And if we look at how you could come to that conclusion on your own, you see this media list. So you could do message_data.media list, press enter, and you get this. Well, it's an object, so I can do dir of that same thing. So what's in that module, press enter, and now it gives me all of these things. Some of these I'm very familiar with. A lot of these, like, I can just completely ignore because I know that they're not methods, because I don't write stuff like this. I mean, they are methods, but they're not things that I would probably end up using. You as a developer wouldn't write a method like that, most likely, at least as a beginner. But I do notice the list. So let's see if list.list is something. I press enter, and it gives me a directory. It doesn't actually have any other methods in it. So if I scroll up a little bit and press list again, now it says bound method, normalized, whatever. So bound method, meaning it is a method. So I can use parentheses here because it says bound method. I press enter. It now gives me a list of these objects. Now, in these objects, I could do 0, right? So that's now showing me that object. Again, I could do the directory of that particular object, and I can see all of the various things in there, such as URI. Now, I have a lot of experience doing this, so I would have recognized, hey, URI is definitely something that I could use and then just jump into that. Because sometimes the documentation is not clear as to what you can do. So you can then, let's go ahead and press up one time and do .uri, and now I get that URL again. That's really, really nice. So I can actually create a list for it by just doing image list. Actually, let's write this down here, and I'll do image list equals to parentheses, square brackets, i.uri, for I in message data dot media list dot list, and then we'll print out the image list. I'll explain why this works in just a second, and we will paste it in here, and what do you know, we got that image in there again, and now it comes in as list. So another learning opportunity if you don't know this already. This is a shortcut for doing for I in message data, or basically for I in some list. Then we would do the new list equals to an empty thing, And then we could just do the new list dot append i.uri, which is this right here. URI. Or we could say X here. It doesn't have to be I. It can be any variable that we set. But this is saying the same thing as that. This is just a little shortcut method. And I'm going to leave that in as a note because it's not real. You, of course, I would challenge you, if you didn't know that this existed, to try this method and then play around with those two things just like that. Cool. So that is the Twilio REST API client. So much easier to work with than using Python requests. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't use Python requests. You can do it either way, but this just makes it a little bit cleaner and a little bit easier. The only reason you would ever want to write your own Python request version or your own API or your own client, essentially, is what we were doing. The only reason you would want to do that is if the service or the third-party service, if they change their API all the time or their client all the time, then you might want to have to update different things as you see here. You would want to do it just slightly different than their API client, mainly because if they change it all the time, and sometimes they just don't have one. All right, so if you have any questions, let us know. Otherwise, let's keep going.